Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Pasta, and I'm the owner of Quickscribe Services. Thanks for joining us today. This session will probably take about 30 minutes. The intent behind this session is really just to update you on a few items that we've been working on, focusing on some of the key features of the service, and hopefully you'll pick up some tips and tricks, and hopefully ultimately be able to use this service to make it easier for you to better understand and keep informed on relevant laws and policies that impact the resource sector in BC. So a little bit of information about us, those who don't know. We are a BC-based company. We're actually based out of Victoria, and we're actually a small outfit. Typically, when you're calling into the office, I'm the one picking up the phone. So I try and be there for my clients, but we've really been supporting the industry for decades now. It was actually my father who started this company up back in the 80s with hard copy forestry and environmental legislation updating service. And I have a degree in something completely unrelated, but I did come on board around 98 and helped transition over to the online world, and actually really fell in love with the service and the client. So I've been on ever since. So that's the background. I'll give you probably go through a few slides here just to give you a summary of the key features, some of the newer features, and then I'll take you into the program, and then we'll have lots of time at the end. I will field any questions you may have. So Quickscribe is now found in most government ministries. We have different platforms. This is the resource-based platform, which really we worked with Ministry of Forests back in the day to build in consultation with them. But now we're used by most ministries, Ministry of Forests, obviously, BCER, BC Hydro, a lot of Crown corporations, most major resource-based companies, the big mining, forestry companies, local governments use us, and we're also found in the universities as well. So for some of you who are not familiar with Quickscribe, probably the most important thing to note is that we are more up to date than what you'd find on BC laws or any other source by several months, especially for regulations. So a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that if you're going on BC laws or any other resource, that they're not necessarily as up to date. In most cases, they're not, and they're often behind in terms of consolidation when there are changes coming through. We have a lot of PDF functionalities on here that allow you to print off sections or policies on demand. I'll walk you through some of that. But really what we're known for too is the alerts. So some of you don't have to get into the legislation and policy that often, but you want to be made aware when there are important changes coming through, not just when they come into force, but you want to not be caught off guard. A lot of tools that will alert you to these changes. And you don't even have to be an expert at tracking legislation. I'm not a lawyer. Most of my clients aren't lawyers, although the major law firms do subscribe to the service as well. But we have, for example, a new tool that I'd really encourage you to have a look at. It's called the Keyword Alert Tool. And this tool will allow you to enter keywords or subject matter that's important to your role in your organization, or important information that's relevant to your industry or your company. So, for example, if you're a forester, a stewardship plan might be something that would be important to you, riparian zone, contaminated soil, contaminated sites. Think of some key terminology that's important to you. And what we're going to essentially do is you'll enter that as your keyword, and we're going to track any new bills that come into force or are brought in. Bills become acts or amend acts. Any new orders, very hard to track orders, regulations, ministerial orders, and even Hansard, the debates in the legislature. So if they're discussing some terminology that's really important to you, and you want to get notified of the fact that there's some legislative discussion in the works in the legislature, we're actually scanning all the discussions, all the text, and within hours, if there's an event that references and matches your keyword, we're going to send you an email with a link to that reference. So it's a really good way for you to keep tabs on important information, legislation, and policy without even knowing what kind of acts and regulations to track. So for example, I'm tracking wildfire, I will get a reference, and in this case, this is just an example that there was a parliamentary session discussion that dealt with wildfires, and then I can click through and view it. In this case, again, it's Hansard, the debate in the legislature. So this is just an example, but there's lots of ways, and you can set up multiple alerts for this. So we built this in-house for professionals, for foresters, for occupational health managers, environmental professionals. So I think you're going to find, generally speaking, that it's going to save you time navigating and trying to find what you're looking for. Lots of historical points in time tools. Our legislation goes back to the 90s, but it's really easy to go back and see how a section read if there was a recent change. People like the fact that we're accessible. Being a smaller business and being able to pick up the phone and be there when clients call in, people appreciate that. But what we're also known for is being flexible enough to do early consolidation, so you can see how key legislation will look when it eventually comes into force. And so people will often call us and say, hey, Mike, we need a early consolidation of the Environmental Management Act as it will read when these important changes come through, and I'll have my staff do that and make that available. People like to know that they can contact us and we're able to take on these types of requests. We also have annotations on our site. We have different levels of annotations. So we have kind of the traditional annotations where I've brought on board a number of different experts. We call them our experts. Often they're lawyers, been in that industry, authoritative lawyers who specialize in different areas of law. So Jeff Wattinen specializes in forestry law. If there's a case that comes up or a legislative event and he feels that would be important to the industry, he'll add some commentary and discussion and references as it relates to legislation. Everything's from the legislation perspective. So you can go to a section of the Forest Act and you'll see a reference that he's made that he feels is important to make mention of. You do have the ability, by the way, to create your own notes on the system. I'll show you how to do that, and even collaborate with colleagues. So forestry is an area we have experts who provide commentary on environmental law, occupational health and safety. I'm looking for a new energy person to come on board. But essentially, these are people who are well known in the industry, and they're looking out for you, and they're going to be providing ongoing annotations whenever there's events or cases that relate to legislation in their field. We also have Hansard, and Hansard are the debates in the legislature. And why that's important for you is that debates in the legislature will often provide you with some insight on the intent behind the legislation, because ultimately you want to understand what does that section mean and how is it to be applied. So for example, often a minister standing up and providing some clarity on what does that section mean? Maybe there's some questions coming back and forth from the opposition. And by providing clarity, often in layman's terms, you're going to understand the information better. So we have over 15,000 Hansard references that cite not every section, but most sections. So if you see a little H icon adjacent to a section, click on it, and you'll have a window into the intent behind the legislation that the government's trying to explain. What does that section mean? So that's a very valuable component. And if you haven't clicked onto any of those references, I'd encourage you to do that. Along the same lines, we introduced about a year and a half ago these supplemental notes. They're little blue icons adjacent to the section. Everything's from the section level. And you can also have these supplemental notes next to bills and on the title of an act or regulation as well. But essentially, along the same lines as Hansard, these are intended to provide you with some additional background information, not necessarily from the debates in the legislature, but more context in terms of maybe there's some ministry guidebooks or government action regulations that reference this section, or maybe there's some industry news that cites this section. So basically the how and the why a section came to be, but also links to references that you should be aware of when you're referencing these sections. So these are relatively new. All of this information is searchable, but ultimately what we're trying to do is provide you with layers of information to help you understand the sections and the legislation. So most of you have access. I know we have a number of people from different industries here, the oil and gas, mining, forestry, we have occupational health and safety managers, but ultimately most of the clients are set up on an unlimited access. And if you're unsure on how to create an account, contact your administrator or contact me directly, Mike at quickscribe.bc.ca, and I'm happy to help you, provide you with your access instructions. And you are typically able to access this from any portal, whether it be work or offsite, and you can set up unlimited alerts as well. So that's the background information. I'm going to take you actually into the program itself now. So this is what it looks like when you first log in. And if you haven't done so already, the first thing that you're going to want to do perhaps is set up some bookmarks. There's the title search at the top here. This is also available on the main search page, but the title search is ultimately where you want to start your searching. So I can start typing in a reference to a guidebook or an order or a law, and you can start to see how we build and display the different types of laws and documents. I'm just going to type in the Forest Act as an example. We are a BC legislation service provider, so we have all BC legislation, including historical laws that have been repealed. We have a lot of federal legislation, but we don't have all federal legislation. I have to be careful on what we take on because we're quite quick at updating the provincial legislation. So I'm cautious on taking too much on too quickly. That said, let's just open up the Forest Act here. And when you open up the laws that you use on a regular basis as your kind of first step, my suggestion would be to bookmark them. So I can click a bookmark here. You can actually go into sections that you reference on a regular basis, and you can select bookmarks here. And ultimately, these will show up on the left-hand side. So maybe just zoom in a little bit for you to see that. And unlimited bookmarks, and you also have recently viewed legislation based on your own activity. Because when you log into Quickscribe, you want to access the legislation and policies you reference most frequently, and those are going to be readily available if you go ahead and bookmark those sections. Now, I have bookmarked a few sections just as an example here, so I'm going to go to the Forest Act. One of the more popular features on our site are these little amendment flags, and they kind of scream out at you where there was last a change, when the change took effect, and more importantly, you can actually click on these little arrows, and you can go back and view how the section read the day before that change took effect. So you're kind of your window into the past, and that's helpful, obviously, if you're referencing a section and it was amended last month. Maybe you want to be made aware of it, and you want to be able to quickly go back and view how did that section read the day before that change took effect. So those are the little amendment flags. If you want to know about the colors, we have a legend on the top menu bar at the top here. When you're in a law, it explains the different colors. Really, the dates are the most important thing. The colors represent what type of an amendment it was. Was it repealed or added or substituted? And all the different icons on our site are also explained in that legend. And again, that legend's on the top menu bar when you're in a law. You're also going to start noticing these little H references. And again, these are Hansard, and Hansard are the debates in the legislature. So whenever you see an H icon, just click onto it. And if there are multiple debates over the years, the most current debate that references that section, the most current discussion, will be visibly available there. Again, ultimately, it's providing you with some background information and some clarity on how this section is to be applied, which is really important if you want to understand the intent. And so I'm going to close out of here. Again, these are all searchable using our keyword searching. I'll get into that in a moment. And we also have these little supplemental notes. We have a few thousand of these, but we're adding more all the time. And these will provide you with some information about the legislative amendments that took place. Sometimes we'll have, let's see if I can find some others randomly here, links to government guidebooks. So they can be anything. But if there's information that cites that section, whether it be a government policy or some background news item that the ministry put out, maybe it's something about some upcoming changes to that section, you're going to have that little icon show up, and then I'd suggest clicking onto it. Again, some additional information to supplement your research. So we've got Hansard, we've got supplemental notes. Let me go to a section that has some Hansard here. So here's an example. Time you're in the document, if you select the pencil icon, add annotation, and these are your own notes, just like you would do with a hard copy. You can write your own notes. You can make a note about an upcoming change. If you have a policy that relates to your operations and you want to upload a document that accompanies your annotation or a link to another document, these are private as a default, so that the next time you visit that section, you'll be able to view your note. You also have the ability to share these with your colleagues, and that helps with the knowledge management. If you've gone through and created some convenient links or commentary, you can share that information. And I'm not going to get into that right now because I could spend another half hour getting into the types of annotations that you can create and share and collaborate. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about how the annotations work, there's an annotations page, and there's a video tutorial on how this works. And you can search all the annotations. It will show you how to create organizational annotations. But let me go back to that section just momentarily. And you're going to see there's been some different annotations that have been published to these sections. So I've gone in and created a private annotation. We also have a building icon, which means that I have shared it with others or others have shared it with me. And by others, I mean others in your account. So you can collaborate in a secured environment with information relating to legislation as it relates to your operations within your account, so nobody else can view that. But ultimately, I think for the most part, you're going to be wanting to click on these star icons. And these star icons are annotations that have been contributed by one of my expert annotators. So we try and distinguish the different types of annotations that have been published. So I've got my own annotation here. I've got a colleague of mine who published an annotation. There's some collaboration there. And then we have our expert annotators. This is Richard Beretti, and he primarily focuses on the Environmental Management Act. And so he's pointed out a case in this situation that you should be aware of and describes the case and why it's important for you to understand that when you're referencing the section. You can follow these individuals, by the way, just by clicking the follow feature here. And then whenever Richard or one of our other contributors publishes a new annotation to the site, you're going to get an email notification and you'll be able to authenticate yourself and view what he's published. So those are the different layers of information that you'll see adjacent to all these sections, whether it be flags, whether it be supplemental notes, Hansard, annotations, all of these things combined are going to help you understand. On this gray menu bar, these are features that you will need to use or would want to use when you're in a law. So for example, we have older versions of the law you're referencing here, and these dates actually represent a point in time when there was a change. Most of our legislation goes back to the 90s. This particular tool will help you determine exactly how the whole law read on this date, and we show you how long did it read on either end when there are no changes. And these are fully searchable and they're printable as well. You also have access to the definitions. If you're doing a report and you need something printed off, we have really good PDF functionality. I can go in and select specific sections with or without annotations or notes that you've created or notes that one of my contributors have posted. In this example, I'm just going to print off a few random sections here. It's date stamped. You're not going to waste a lot of paper, but it's a real professional format. And remember, you're printing off something that's probably going to be at least a few weeks more up to date than what you'd find elsewhere. Sometimes you'll just want to do a quick search within a piece of legislation. And this is especially convenient for new members that come on board who aren't that familiar with legislation. So we have a search feature on the top left here. General rule of thumb, if you're searching for anything that's more than one word in length, use quotation marks because that's going to find the exact phrase. So in this case, I'm going to type in stewardship plan. And what's nice about this search is that it's now scanning the entire law, and you all in one window, you can quickly go through and filter through to find the section that has relevance to you. The highest concentration will come up to the top. And then you can click through on that and jump to that section. Now, we have advanced, we have Boolean, we have proximity searches, which means you can search for a stewardship plan within 5 words of the word stream, for example. If you want to learn about all the operators, the Boolean search tips is that little question mark there. And we have a video tutorial as well on how this works. And that can be found on the main search page as well. But let's say you want to search beyond the scope of the Forest and Range Practices Act. So the main search at the very top menu bar, this is also available, by the way, on the home page. So the title search is the default, and that's where you typically want to search for the title of the law or the document you're looking for. So just remember to switch this to keyword search, that toggle. And again, the same principles apply. And so we've got a number of different types of documents and references here. So obviously we've got acts, we've got bills, we've got annotation references, Hansard, the debates in the legislature, supplemental notes, manuals, reporters that we send out. For the most part, you're looking for legislation. So my suggestion would be to switch this to law. And what's nice about this search results page is that it's conducive to the type of research that you're doing, in the sense that you've got the number of hits beside each law. It might bring up regulations that you might not first think to even look in, but it's super easy for you to expand and collapse each one of these without losing your spot. And so it's just going to save you a little bit of time. By the way, you're going to notice there's some references to early consolidations here. When there are changes that are coming into force, substantive changes, sometimes we'll do an early consolidation to show you what the law will look like when it eventually comes into force, which is convenient for you to reference that. It's usually red text, so we make a very big distinction between laws that are in force and not in force. If you want to look at other laws that we have for special early consolidations, you can click on that left page there, special early consolidations. I'll also show you some of the alerts, and the alerts on the top main menu page here. So the first default that shows up on your screen is the BC Legislative Digest. And this particular alert is ideal for those who want to track changes to legislation. So if you have specific laws that you want to track or a category of law, this you can set up for others as well, this particular alert. So if you have a colleague that would benefit from receiving alerts when there are changes, then you can set them up as well. So, and you have the option of either doing a category of law like environmental, occupational health and safety, or forestry. So in this case, I'm actually going to track a few key laws, but you can set up multiple alerts. So in this case, I'm just going to say the Forest Act, and that is the subject header. So that's what's going to come through in the email. So make it relevant, right? The other options are to do all categories of law. I would stay away from that one because we include family law and other areas. So if you're going to do a category, the next page will explain what those categories are. They're quite broad. So forestry law, I mean, we have dozens and dozens of references or regulations. That's fine if there's specific laws or specific bills. So I'm going to use that as the example. You have the option of doing this weekly or daily. The daily will only come out if there's an amendment or a change, or weekly will come out regardless. It'll be your summary. So I'm just going to select daily because I'm only going to select a few laws here. And then you can go through, you can search the law. The acts are in blue. The regulations are tucked underneath each act. And so I'm going to select this. You can search regulations as well. I'm just tracking the Forest Act. And this page entitles you to receive notification prior to changes come into force, so you're not caught off guard. So for example, this section here are proposed changes. So let's say you're tracking the Forest Act and there's a new bill that's introduced today and it proposes a change to the Forest Act. It's called first reading when they first introduced that bill. Within hours, you're going to get an email from us with a link to the section of the bill that amends the Forest Act, and you can actually see what the change is. So it's a really great, you're going to be the first to know about an amendment that could potentially influence your industry and your role in your organization. So first reading bill, some people want to be made aware of every step that bill makes its way into law. My suggestion, just keep first reading and royal assent. When a bill reaches royal assent, that means it will come into force either on that day or in the future. So for those who are interested in receiving advance notice of changes, that's what I would suggest. And then or you can receive notification when those acts come into force. The other alerts include the Quickscribe Reporter. And if you haven't already signed up to this is just once a month. And we put a lot of effort, a lot of resources into compiling articles for this. So you've got the forestry news and environmental news, the general news at the top. And then we do have the different categories for the EnviroFor service. We have energy and mines, we have forestry and environment, occupational health and safety. And the articles themselves are taken from various sources that you wouldn't necessarily find if you're just using the government sites or a law firm blog. So it's a really unique blend of articles that we've curated, but as long as they're referencing changes, news items, policy, legislative summaries, that's what we're going to select, and we're going to add them into this monthly reporter. And we also include a summary of all of the changes that have come into force over the last 4 weeks. What's unique about this is that not only is it a really good summary of everything that's happening legislatively and policy and industry news, but we typically send the reporter out on the 3rd of every month, 4th, and that's because we're so fast at updating the changes that we will often include changes that come in on the 1st of every month. Often when there's legislative changes, they will sometimes come in on the 1st of every month, and we want to be able to capture that and send you those changes within a few days of the release of this reporter. So this is the EnviroFor reporter. If you haven't signed up to it already, I would suggest at the very least go ahead and do that. And again, you can sign up to all of these alerts on the My Alerts tab at the top. This is my favorite alert. We launched this a few years ago. Not a lot of people are taking advantage of this yet. So I've gone in and I've created a number of different alerts for myself: wildfire management, watershed, assessment officer, anything that's going to be of value to you in terms of tracking. And you can set up multiple alerts. So I've got stewardship plan, any new bills that come out that deal with stewardship plan. Bills become acts or amend acts. There's orders, regulations, debates in the legislature if they're discussing stewardship plans. Maybe you want to be made aware of what that discussion is, news items that we put out, and the frequency that you receive. You're going to get an email whenever there's a reference, and we'll take you to that link. So I'd encourage you to try signing up for that. Be as specific as possible. Don't put forestry, because there's going to be lots of references to forestry on all those kind of sources. So try and be very specific if you can. There's 3 other alerts, the tracking alerts, and these are for those who want to just select specific sections of legislation. So if you go to a law, you're going to have sections that you want to track. Sometimes you don't want to get notified if there are other sections that aren't relevant to you, and you just simply select the tracking icon. You can do this from the table of contents as well and do multiple sections. You click onto that and it's going to start tracking. If there's any amendments to that section, you're going to get notified. The other alerts are annotations, and you can set up alerts to receive annotations by law. So for example, if I go to the Forest Act here, there's a button here that very top, and it says follow annotations. So this is for those that want to receive notification when one of our contributors publishes annotations, expert annotators publishes a new annotation adjacent to these sections on this particular law. You're going to get notification from us via email, and then you'll be able to authenticate yourself and view that. So that's just another way to keep tabs on not legislative changes per se, but new annotations that are being added either by your colleagues or by one of our contributors. And along those same lines, going back to that main alerts page, you can follow individuals. So you can receive notification when one of your colleagues publishes an annotation, or probably more importantly, you can go through the list of our contributors and find the individual that fits your area of interest. So Paul McLean does occupational health and safety, and he just came on board a few weeks ago, so he hasn't created any new annotations, but you can follow this individual so that you'll receive notification whenever he publishes an annotation anywhere on the Quickscribe site. So these are all just different types of alerts, but I'm sure there's at least 1 or 2 of them that will help you keep tabs of important information relating to the legislation and policies that matter most to you. So on the left-hand side, we have our typical browse features. If you want to browse through the bills or link consolidations, reporters, this is an area that government action regulations, policies, guidebooks area where we're really going to be focusing in 2024. We've hired a consultant to come help us and add additional content. So we have, for example, the new BC Wildfire Services policies, which have been around for a little while, but only have publicly been made available. And these are fully searchable. So we've added these in consultation with the ministry. We work very closely with the ministry, so we're always looking for opportunities to provide supplemental information and documents and orders. Orders are a big challenge. Orders that are passed on the regional level sometimes are a bit challenging for even ministry staff to monitor. So we're working with the ministry and our consultant to try and come up with a good baseline for all those orders and a good tracking system for some of these land use orders and other documents. So we'll be advising you when we do come out with new content for that. So for all of this information that I'm going over today, if you want to drill down in a little bit more detail, the help menu in the very top menu bar is where you'd want to go to find video tutorial on all these features. And then finally, you have a My Account page, and the My Account page is where you'd want to go to manage all of your information. You've set up alerts, you've got documents you've uploaded, policies, you're following individuals. This is the page to go to do that. So I'm going to stop it there. Thank you so much. I'm going to do a very quick recap, and then I'll take some questions. I know you've been very patient, but so just a very quick recap. EnviroFor will offer you access to legislation that's updated weeks to months ahead of any other source. It'll also provide you with helpful information on how to understand and interpret the information, whether they be supplemental notes, Hansard, annotations. We have historical flags, lots of historical tools. We also have a number of alerts that will notify you when there are changes that are relevant to you, either by keywords or subject matter, or select legislation or new annotations that are added as well. And we also have great searching to find what you're looking for quickly and efficiently. So hopefully you found this useful. I'm going to take some questions now.